They say old age is about peace, quiet, and watching your family grow around you. But let me tell you something, folks. My so-called family turned my golden years into a living hell. Yes, I'm an old man. 78 years on this earth. I've worked my whole life, built a home with my bare hands, buried my beloved wife in the backyard under the oak tree she planted, and I thought I'd raise a son with values. Turns out what I raised was a selfish, spineless fool who sold his own house, handed his conniving wife $700,000 to burn through, and then, when the money started shrinking, dumped themselves at my doorstep. And that was only the beginning, because the day she slapped me across the face in my own living room, something inside me snapped. And that very night, I called my lawyer. When the court papers hit her hands, she screamed like a cornered rat. But before I tell you how sweet that revenge tasted, let's rewind. You need to hear everything. If your son sold his house, gave all the money to his wife, and then tried to move in with you, would you let them? Or would you slam the door shut? Let me know in the comments. My son, Daniel, wasn't always useless. He was a good kid once. Polite, hardworking, and smart. But everything changed when he met her, Melissa. Melissa, with her fake blonde hair, designer bags, and crocodile smile. She had Daniel wrapped around her little finger before I could blink. I warned him. I told him, "Son, women like that don't marry men. They marry wallets." But Daniel didn't listen. He said, "Dad, you just don't understand. She loves me." Love? Huh. If that was love, then I'm Elvis Presley. Melissa never worked a day in her life. She had expensive taste and a bottomless stomach for luxury. And Daniel, my one smart son, sold his house and handed her $700,000, like a puppy bringing a bone to its master. And guess where they landed after that? Right at my doorstep. I opened the door that afternoon to see Daniel standing there, suitcases at his feet, Melissa wearing sunglasses indoors like she was some Hollywood diva. "Dad," Daniel said sheepishly, we need a place to stay for a while." Melissa didn't even say hello. She just shoved past me, dragging her designer luggage across my wooden floor. "Your place is cozy," she sniffed, like my home was a shabby motel. My blood boiled, but I held my tongue. Backhand index pointing right, would you have let them stay, or slammed the door in their faces right then and there? Little did I know, letting them stay was the biggest mistake of my life. That was just the beginning. Within weeks, Melissa would turn my peaceful home into a battlefield. And one day, her hand would connect with my face, and that's when the real war began. At first, I tried to convince myself it was temporary. "They'll stay a couple weeks," I muttered, "just until they find their footing." But deep down, I already knew better, because people like Melissa don't move in for a couple of weeks. They move in like termites, silent at first, then chewing through the walls of your life until nothing's left but dust. Within days, Melissa had rearranged my living room. The couch I'd had for 20 years, gone. She listed it online without even asking me. In its place appeared some oversized, ugly sectional sofa in blinding white, like we lived inside a hospital. When I objected, she smirked and said, "Daniel, and I need a space that feels modern. Your stuff was depressing." Depressing. That's what she called the furniture my late wife picked out. The furniture that still smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. Daniel just stood there, silent, eyes glued to Melissa like she was a son. And that was only the beginning. She upgraded the kitchen by filling it with gadgets she bought online, using Daniel's rapidly shrinking bank account. Air fryers, smoothie machines, fancy wine racks, everything except groceries. Because food, that was apparently my responsibility. One morning, I walked in to make myself a cup of coffee, only to find Melissa sipping some overpriced latte she'd had delivered. I asked, "Melissa, did you buy groceries this week?" She gave me that look, the kind that makes you feel like a speck of dirt under her shoe. "Oh, we figured you'd handle that. You're retired. You have time to shop." I clenched my jaw. "Melissa, I'm retired, not your personal servant. You've got 2 good legs, and Daniel has 2 hands. Go to the store yourselves." She rolled her eyes, muttering under her breath, "Cheap old man." I heard it, every word. Would you tolerate someone moving into your home and expecting you to pay for everything? Or would you throw them out right then and there? The final straw came on a rainy Thursday evening. I had just come back from the pharmacy with my arthritis meds. My knees were screaming, and all I wanted was to sit in my chair, watch the news, and rest. But when I walked into the living room, Melissa was sprawled out in my recliner, the very one I bought after my hip surgery. I cleared my throat. "Melissa, that's my chair." She didn't move. Instead, she flipped through channels on the TV and said, "First come, first served. You can sit on the couch." I felt my blood pressure spike. That chair wasn't just furniture. It was where I had spent countless nights recovering, where I'd fallen asleep reading books, where my late wife once sat beside me knitting sweaters. That chair was mine. "Melissa," I said firmly, "get up." She finally turned, eyes blazing. And then it happened, out of nowhere. She jumped to her feet, marched up to me, and slapped me across the face. The sting of her palm burned my cheek, but the fire inside me burned hotter. Daniel rushed forward, panicked. "Melissa," he cried, "what are you doing?" But Melissa wasn't apologizing. "Oh no," she sneered at me and spat. "Maybe if you weren't such a miserable old man, people wouldn't hate living with you." I stood there in silence for a long moment, staring at my son, the boy I raised, the boy who once brought me hand-drawn Father's Day cards. And all I saw was a coward who let his wife strike his father in his own home. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. I realized I wasn't powerless. I wasn't trapped. And if Melissa thought she could treat me like dirt in my own home, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. That night, I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. What I set in motion would shake their world to the core. Because the next time Melissa got mail, it wasn't a shopping package. It was a court summons. If someone slapped you in your own home, would you call the cops immediately, or would you wait and plot a bigger revenge? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the sting of Melissa's slap, not just on my cheek, but on my pride, my dignity, my very existence as a man who built this house brick by brick. But rage without action is just wasted breath. And I had a card up my sleeve that Melissa and Daniel had no idea about. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. "Henderson Law Office," came his calm voice. "It's me," I said. My voice was low, steady, the way it gets when you're done with nonsense. "We need to talk. It's about my son and his wife. They've crossed the line." Henderson sighed knowingly. He'd handled my will, my property deeds, and he knew the kind of leeches my son had married into. "What happened this time?" he asked. "She hit me," I said simply, "in my own home." There was silence on the other end for a moment. Then his voice sharpened. "All right, do you want them out?" "Not just out," I replied. "I want them to regret ever thinking they could take advantage of me. I want every legal door slammed in their faces." "Would you go straight for eviction, or would you make them sweat with something bigger first?" Henderson explained the process. "Since your name is the only one on the deed, and since they haven't paid rent, they're nothing more than squatters. We can file an eviction notice. But given the slap and her behavior, we can add harassment and elder abuse to the mix." Those two words, elder abuse, hit like a thunderclap. Melissa thought she was untouchable. She thought being married to my son gave her power. But the law was about to show her just how powerless she really was. I leaned back in my chair, almost smiling. "Do it," I said. For 3 days, I acted like nothing had changed. Melissa strutted around the house, barking orders, insulting me under her breath, and treating Daniel like her personal wallet and chauffeur. Daniel himself looked more worn down every day, but still, he said nothing. My spineless son, too scared to stand up to his wife, too blind to stand up for his father. And then came the day. It was a Saturday morning. Melissa had just finished bragging on the phone to one of her friends about a spa weekend she was planning, with my son's dwindling money, of course. The doorbell rang. Melissa, expecting another one of her endless deliveries, flounced to the door. But instead of a package, a man in a neat uniform stood there. "Melissa Turner?" he asked. "Yes," she said, annoyed. He handed her a thick envelope. "You've been served." Her painted smile froze. What is this?" she stammered. The man didn't wait to explain. He just turned and left, his duty done. Melissa tore the envelope open, and then it happened. Her face drained the color, her voice cracked, and she shrieked like a corner rat. She stormed into the living room where I was sipping my morning coffee. "What is this?" she screamed, waving the papers in the air. I didn't even look up right away. I just took a slow sip, savoring the taste of victory. "Those," I said finally, "are eviction papers and a restraining order. Congratulations, you're officially unwelcome in my house." Daniel snatched the papers from her hands, scanning them with wide, panicked eyes. "Dad, what is this?" "You can't." "Oh, but I can." I cut him off. "This is my house, Daniel. Paid for with my blood and sweat. And I won't be slapped in my own living room by some gold-digging parasite you married." Melissa let out a sound between a scream and a sob. "You can't do this to me. I've sacrificed everything for this family." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Which part was a sacrifice? Selling your own house and blowing $700,000? Or moving into my home and treating me like dirt?" She had no answer. Just fury. Pure, helpless fury. "If you were in my shoes, would you feel guilty about kicking out your own son with his wife? Or would you sleep like a baby?" But that wasn't the end. Because Melissa wasn't the type to go down quietly. She had one last card to play. And so did I. I thought the court papers would be the end of it. But no. With people like Melissa, humiliation doesn't make them surrender. It makes them dangerous. The night after the summons arrived, I heard screaming from the guest room. Melissa was throwing things, shoes, clothes, anything she could grab. Daniel tried to calm her, but his voice was drowned out by her shrill rage. "How dare he? An old man thinks he can ruin me? He'll regret this. I'll take him for everything he has." I sat in my room, listening, shaking my head. She still didn't get it. She thought she could manipulate, threaten, maybe even scare me into backing down. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was prepared. 2 days later, I got an unexpected visit from a different lawyer. Melissa had filed a claim against me. She accused me of verbal harassment, of being unfit, of creating an unsafe living environment. In other words, she tried to flip the script. The lawyer handed me her complaint. Melissa was seeking damages. Money. She wanted my house. And for the first time in this whole ordeal, I laughed. If your greedy daughter-in-law tried to sue you for your own house, how would you react? Laugh? Cry? Or burn her claim to ashes? See, Melissa didn't know one very important detail. Months earlier, before they even moved in, Henderson had helped me update my estate plans. Not only was the deed ironclad in my name, but I'd also quietly placed the property in a family trust, a legal fortress, which meant no outsider, especially not Melissa, could ever touch it. So while she thought she had me cornered, she was swinging at air. I showed Henderson the papers from her lawyer. He skimmed them, smirked, and said, "This will be fun." The day of the hearing, Melissa strutted in like she was starring in her own reality show. Full makeup, high heels, sunglasses perched on her head. Daniel trailed behind her, looking like a man headed for the gallows. When the judge entered, Melissa immediately launched into her performance. "Your Honor, this cruel old man is trying to throw us onto the street. He's abusive, controlling, and unstable." I sat quietly, hands folded, letting her dig her own grave. Then Henderson stood, calm, sharp, precise. He laid out the facts. The house deed was solely in my name. Melissa and Daniel had not contributed a single dollar in rent or expenses. The slap, witnessed by Daniel, constituted elder abuse. And finally, the trust agreement ensured Melissa had zero claim to my property. The judge's eyebrows rose higher with every point. When Henderson finished, Melissa's face was a mask of panic. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Turner, you not only have no legal right to this property, but your behavior toward the homeowner is unacceptable. This court sides entirely with Mr. Turner. You are hereby ordered to vacate the premises within 72 hours. Failure to do so will result in forcible removal. Melissa's jaw dropped. Daniel covered his face with his hands. And me? I just smiled. Back at the house, Melissa unleashed hell. "You spineless idiot," she screamed at Daniel. "You let your father ruin us. You let him humiliate me." Daniel tried to argue, but Melissa wasn't listening. She hurled her designer bag against the wall, grabbed her clothes, and stormed out. Daniel followed quietly, dragging his suitcase. And just like that, after months of torment, my house was quiet again, peaceful, mine. A week later, I was sitting on my porch, sipping sweet tea, watching the sunset. For the first time in months, I felt free. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. "Dad, I'm sorry. Can I come back?" I stared at the screen, shaking my head, and I typed back one word. "No." Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't fighting for your peace. It's refusing to let toxic people, even family, take it away again. Would you forgive your son after all that? Or would you shut the door forever like I did? And that's how I learned one of the hardest lessons of my life. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect. And if you can't find respect in your own house, then you fight for it, no matter how old you are. Because revenge, when done legally and calmly, tastes a lot like justice. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life family drama and AITA-style revenge stories. Because trust me, this old man's got plenty more where that came from.